My dad slid a $50 bill across the Thanksgiving table, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Here, go fix a pipe somewhere." 23 people watched him do it. My aunt laughed. My cousin covered her mouth. My brother-in-law just stared at his plate like the mashed potatoes suddenly got really interesting. I didn't flinch. I picked up the bill, folded it once, and put it in my jacket pocket. And if you've ever sat at a dinner table and felt completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Because I need to know I'm not the only one who's lived through something like this. My name is Fiona. I'm 32 years old. And for almost a decade, my family genuinely believed I spent my days crawling under houses fixing leaky faucets. Let me back up. I grew up in a 2-story colonial outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Middle-class neighborhood, church, every Sunday. The kind of block where everyone knows what car you drive and approximately how much you paid for it. My parents weren't cruel people. I want to be clear about that. They were just certain about how the world worked, certain about what success looked like, certain about which of their 2 daughters had figured it out. That was never me. My older sister Claudia is 4 years older and has always been the version of a daughter my parents could describe at dinner parties without having to explain anything. She married a cardiologist named Preston when she was 28. They have a house in the mainline suburbs. Their kids are in private school. My mom once framed a photo of Claudia and Preston at a charity gala and put it on the mantel next to my grandmother's rosary. That's the level we're dealing with. Me, I was always the one they had to explain. I wasn't a bad student. I graduated with honors from Temple University with a degree in environmental engineering. But from the moment I told my parents I'd gotten into Temple, my dad made a face like I'd told him I was going to beauty school. "Temple," he said. "Couldn't you apply somewhere with more, prestige?" I was 17. I didn't have the words then to tell him that Temple's engineering program was excellent, that I'd gotten a partial scholarship, that I had a plan. I just said I like it and went back to my room. 4 years later, I graduated and took a job with the Philadelphia Water Department. Junior engineer, Water Infrastructure Division. It wasn't glamorous. I wore steel-toed boots to work. I drove out to job sites in a city truck. I wrote reports about pipe deterioration and water main replacement schedules. I loved it. When I told my mom, she got very quiet in that specific way she has. Like she's rearranging something in her head and doesn't want you to see her doing it. Then she said, "So you work for the city? Like a city worker?" I said yes. She said, "And what does that pay?" I told her. It was a reasonable starting salary for an engineer in Pennsylvania. She made another one of those faces and said, "Well, at least you have benefits." That was the last real conversation my parents ever had about my job. Over the next few years, every time we got together for holidays or family dinners, I would say something like, "We just finished replacing a 2-mile stretch of lead pipe in North Philly," and my dad would nod once, the way you nod when someone tells you about traffic on the highway. Okay. And then he'd turn to Claudia and ask about Preston's practice. My mom asked me once, and I mean directly. She looked at me and said, "Fiona, what exactly is your title? What do you actually do?" I started to explain. I said, "I'm an infrastructure engineer. We manage." And she literally interrupted me to say, "So you work on plumbing, like pipes?" I said it was more complex than that. She said, "Why do you always make it so difficult to explain?" and turned away to refill the bread basket. I stood in that kitchen for about 10 seconds wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. After that, I stopped trying. I don't know exactly when I made that decision. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a scene. I just stopped volunteering information. They never really asked, and I got tired of the face, tired of the pivot to Claudia, tired of watching my actual career get dismissed in under 30 seconds. So I let them think what they wanted to think. And what they thought, apparently, was that I fixed pipes. Not managed the city's water infrastructure, not led a team of engineers, not worked on projects that affected the drinking water of hundreds of thousands of people. Just fixed pipes. Maybe mopped something. Who knows? The $50 bill thing was actually not the first time something like that happened. There was an Easter dinner a couple years back where my uncle asked what I was up to these days, and my dad answered for me. Said I was working for the city doing maintenance work, nothing fancy. I sat right there. I didn't correct him. My uncle said good, steady work, and that was the end of it. But Thanksgiving 2 years ago was different. We have this tradition of doing a big dinner at my parents' house. My mom cooks for 2 days. There are aunts and uncles, cousins, my grandmother on my dad's side, a few neighbors who have nowhere else to go. That year, there were 23 people, maybe 24. Long table in the dining room, card table set up in the living room for overflow. I drove up from the city alone. Claudia and Preston came in from the suburbs with the kids. The house smelled like my childhood. Roasting turkey, my mum's brown sugar sweet potatoes. That particular combination I'll never be able to separate from complicated feelings. It started fine. We did this thing where everyone says what they're grateful for. The kids were cute. My grandmother patted my hand and asked if I was eating enough. Then my uncle started talking about work. He'd been following some city news about a water main break in northeast Philly that had been in the local paper. A big one, 2 blocks flooded, some road closures, the whole thing. He brought it up the way people bring up news at dinner. Just conversation. Terrible situation, he said. You'd think the city would have caught that sooner. I knew about that break. I knew about it intimately. Our team had actually flagged that segment of pipe in our inspection reports 18 months earlier. The delay in authorization, the budget approval process, the timeline. I knew every piece of it. I started to say something. I said, actually, that section was. My dad cut me off. He said, Fiona works with pipes. She probably knows all about fixing stuff like that. He laughed a little, like it was a funny thing to say, like I was the entertainment. My uncle said, oh yeah? What do you do exactly, sweetheart? Before I could answer my mum, I still cannot fully process this. My mum said from the other end of the table, oh, she's in sanitation. You know, city work. Sanitation. She said it the way you'd say she's in between things right now. Not mean exactly, but small. Like it explained everything and wasn't worth discussing further. My grandmother, who was sitting 2 seats down from me, looked up from her plate. She looked at my mum. She looked at me. I saw something move across her face, but she didn't say anything yet. Then my dad reached into his wallet. I don't know what made him do it. I still don't. Maybe he thought it was funny. Maybe he genuinely didn't know how else to relate to me. Maybe this is just what 20 years of not paying attention to your child looks like when it comes out. He pulled out a $50 bill, held it across the table toward me and said, Here, Fiona, go fix a pipe somewhere. People laughed. Not everyone, but enough. My cousin, she's 20, in college, she doesn't know better. She laughed. My brother-in-law looked at his plate. Claudia looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. She didn't laugh. Preston, her husband, actually chuckled. He picked up his wine glass right after, like punctuation. I looked at the 50. I looked at my dad's face. He was smiling that smile. That's supposed to mean it's just a joke, lighten up. The kind of smile that dares you to react. I reached out, took the bill, folded it, and put it in my pocket. I said, thanks, Dad, and I went back to eating. My grandmother set her fork down very slowly. She pressed her napkin to her mouth. Then she looked at my mother at the other end of the table and said, in a voice that was completely calm and completely terrifying, Marianne, tell this table what your daughter actually does for a living. The table got quiet in that particular way that Thanksgiving tables get quiet, which is different from regular quiet. It has texture to it. You can hear the candles almost. My mum frowned. What do you mean what she does? She works for the city. Her title, my grandmother said, her actual title. My mom looked at me, then back at my grandmother. She's an engineer, mother. She does infrastructure work, something like that. Something like that, my grandmother repeated. She looked at me. Fiona, tell your family what you do. And here's the thing. Right there is the moment I had avoided for 8 years. The moment I could have had 100 times at Easter, at Christmas, at random Sunday dinners, and never took. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I didn't think it mattered. Maybe part of me wanted to see how long they'd go on not knowing. Because at least that proved something I didn't want to say out loud. But my grandmother was looking at me. She was 81 years old. She had bad knees and she'd driven 45 minutes to be at that table. And she was the only person in that room who had looked at me when the $50 bill landed like a joke between us. So I put my fork down. I said, I'm the Deputy Director of Infrastructure Engineering for the Philadelphia Water Department. I manage a division of 46 engineers and oversee a capital improvement program with an annual budget of about $340 million. The water main break you were talking about, Uncle Ray, our team flagged that segment 18 months ago. The delay was a city authorization issue, not an engineering one, and the project that just won the ASCE award for infrastructure rehabilitation this year, that was ours. Nobody said anything. I looked at my dad. I said, I've held this position for 3 years. Before that, I was a senior project engineer for 6 years. My salary is more than Preston's. By a fair amount, actually, I checked, because hospital salary databases are public record. Preston set down his wine glass. My mum said, Fiona, you asked me. I said, you asked me, Mom, twice in the last 4 years. I started to explain and you moved on. I stopped trying to explain because you stopped trying to listen. My grandmother picked up her fork and started eating again like the matter was settled. I reached into my pocket and put the $50 bill on the table next to my dad's plate. I don't need this, I said. My dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Here's what I want to say. For anyone watching this who's been in that seat, I'm not going to tell you that the dinner ended in some beautiful reconciliation. It didn't. We finished eating mostly in silence. My cousin kept staring at her phone. My uncle made a couple of attempts at normal conversation that went nowhere. Claudia, to her credit, came and found me in the kitchen later while I was helping clean up and said quietly, I should have said something, I'm sorry. That mattered to me. It actually really mattered. My dad and I had a conversation the week after Thanksgiving. He called me. It was a hard conversation and it wasn't fully resolved. And I think it's going to take a long time. He said he didn't know. I told him he didn't try to know. There's a difference. He said he understood that. I'm still watching to see if he actually does. My mom and I have been doing the work in a slower way. She asked me recently, out of nowhere, if she could visit me at my office. I said yes. She came on a Tuesday and I showed her around and introduced her to my team, and she was very quiet the whole time. And then in the parking lot, she hugged me for a long time without saying anything. It wasn't an apology exactly. It was something though. My grandmother called me the Sunday after Thanksgiving. She said, I've known for 4 years what you do. One of my friends at church, her daughter works in your department, she told me. I've been waiting for the right moment. I said, 4 years? You knew for 4 years and you never said anything. She said, I was waiting for you to be ready. I don't fully understand what she meant by that. But I think about it a lot. The $50 bill is still in my jacket pocket. I haven't spent it. I keep thinking I'll frame it someday or donate it or do something meaningful with it. Mostly it just sits there. A reminder that sometimes the people who made you also have no idea who you became. And that eventually, one way or another, the table finds out. If you've ever been the person in your family who got written off, who got the face, or the pivot, or the joke at dinner, you already know what I mean. It doesn't matter if you run a company or you actually do mop floors for a living. The $50 was never really about money. It was about being seen as less than. And there's something in a person that eventually quietly refuses to accept that. I'm still working on the rest. But I took that bill off the table. And that's where we start. I've thought a lot about that $50 bill. Not what it cost my dad to pull it out of his wallet. That part was nothing. I've thought about what it cost me to sit there and take it quietly and what it cost my family to spend nearly a decade not knowing the person sitting at their table. Here's what I've come to understand. The way my parents treated me wasn't malicious, it was lazy. And I think lazy indifference, over time, does just as much damage as cruelty. Maybe more, because it's harder to name. My dad didn't hate me. He just never looked closely enough to see me. My mom didn't want me to fail. She just decided early on what my ceiling was and stopped looking up. That's its own kind of harm. And the thing about that kind of harm is that it compounds. Every holiday, every face, it adds up. It builds a wall, brick by brick, until one day you're sitting at a Thanksgiving table and your own father is sliding you $50 like you're the help. But here's the part I have to be honest about too. I let it happen. I'm not saying I deserved it. I'm saying I made a choice somewhere around year 3 or 4 to stop trying. I told myself they'd never listen anyway. Maybe that was true. But it was also easier than fighting for it. And in choosing silence, I handed them permission to keep seeing me as less. That's the piece I've had to sit with. Accountability isn't just for the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's for the ways you quietly stopped standing up for yourself. What changed me wasn't the $50. It was my grandmother's voice. She was 81 years old and she'd known the truth for 4 years, and she waited. Not because she was passive, but because she understood something I didn't yet. That a revelation landing at the wrong moment doesn't land at all. She waited until the room was full, until the insult was public, until I had every reason to stay silent. And then she made it impossible to. That's not luck. That's wisdom. The kind that only comes from watching people for a very long time. I think about the kind of person I want to be going forward, and it looks like her. Not someone who waits to be discovered. Not someone who performs dignity only once people find out the title. Someone who holds herself the same way whether the room knows or doesn't. That's the harder thing. That's the thing I'm still working on. My dad called me the week after. He stumbled through it, but he called. That matters. My mum showed up at my office on a Tuesday and hugged me in a parking lot without saying a word, and that mattered too. None of it undoes the years, but something is being built now that wasn't there before. Slowly, imperfectly, the way most real things get built. The $50 bill is still in my jacket pocket. I keep it there because I need to remember that being underestimated doesn't make you smaller. It just means the people doing it stopped paying attention. And the only answer to that, the only real one, is to keep going anyway. Keep doing the work. Keep becoming the person you already are, with or without the audience. The table always finds out eventually.